The Hines School Sisters of Notre Dame pre-application for development of 280 units at 345 Belden Hill will need a change in Wilton's zoning regulations, not just a variance. Hines acknowledges that their proposed use is not currently allowed. So what is your position on changing Wilton's zoning regulations at the request of developers?
I am happy to answer that question. I believe that as candidates, we can't comment on the specific proposals that haven't been approved or denied yet for legal reasons, but in general, I think that we need to work with developers and we need to assess. The first question has to be, how will this best serve Wilton? Will putting this development in this location, will it increase our tax base and help lower our mill rate? Will it increase traffic or perhaps the number of ambulances going to a certain location depending on what the housing is for? These are really important questions that we need to consider. And look, as other candidates have said, development is going to happen, and we do need to be able to negotiate well and compromise with developers in order to get the best result for the town.
Mr. Chris?
Well, that location was tax exempt for however many years. I think it goes back to the 60s.
Microphone, a little closer to the microphone.
Sorry, thank you. So that location was tax exempt going back to when it was built in the 60s. Again, I believe strongly that, you know, the senior living community in our town of Wilton is a very important one. In this case, we have to look at the opportunity that this location has to improve the revenue of the grand list. I believe I'm a pro-growth person, so I think that the zoning changes that are required for this property should be considered. I also think that as far as traffic goes, you know, that's a location that, you know, has long been a school zone to begin with. I think the stop signs that are, you know, that separate 106 from Belden Hill are adequate. I don't believe that there's any further infrastructure required there, and I do believe that this project should be one that we get behind and approve.
Mr. Hufford?
Well, I think this example of a project is the kind of thing we need to get in front of in the future. There are many different areas within town that there are not overlays done for. We know that other areas like Cannondale, Georgetown, other areas of Route 7, where these kind of projects could be proposed and we'll be behind on. So won't be able to control the process. So I think we should be trying to get ahead of these projects by understanding what people want in these kind of areas and then trying to come up with overlays that might suggest projects for development and get ahead of the developers so that we're not behind when a project comes up that we're going. I don't want to develop areas just because it's going to increase the gram list. I think that's a great goal or a great thing that happens, and it will happen, but I don't want to do it just because of that.
Mr. Hoffman?
Sure. I'm on planning and zoning, so I guess I can't comment exactly on this development because it's before the board right now. But I will say this. While I've been on the board, I have constantly been disappointed that we don't have a better understanding of the economic impact of any development on the town. When we ask questions and when the public writes and asks questions about the impact on the schools, about the impact, as Trevor said, about ambulances and other emergency vehicles in the town, the impact on the budget, we simply don't have those answers. So we're making decisions, the lights were off in this room, and we were making decisions in the dark. This may be, and other developments may be, accretive to the town, a lovely environmental impact, but we don't have that. The second thing we don't do is we don't demand of the developers that they help assuage any negative impacts on the town. We don't see them offering to fund ambulances. I assume ambulances is the plural of ambulance. We just don't see them doing that. We don't see them offering to take some of their property and have public walks put on those pieces of the property. So once again, I think there's a lot to do, there's a lot of engagement that can happen, and there's a lot more information we can have while we make these decisions.
Ms. Seidenbining?
Thank you. With regard to the pre-application, again, I'm not going to comment on specifics with regard to a proposal in front of the board in the pre-application phase. However, I do agree again with the prior candidates with regard to informed decisions. So professionally, I work as a registered nurse. Before patients receive any type of procedure, we give them something called informed consent. Informed consent provides them with all of the information for them to make an informed decision about whether or not they want a procedure. It is unethical to encourage a patient or have a patient receive a procedure without providing them with informed consent. Planning our town should be very similar. All of that information should be accessible, readily available, and the commission should encourage the public to seek that information so that they can make informed decisions. With regard to the site itself, as Ken alluded to, there's a systems approach that we need to take when considering this development. The development is seeking, I believe, 280 senior units, and when we consider state legislation and how this equates to housing unit equivalents, we need to consider that senior living is actually on the lower end of that spectrum. So it's not something that we're necessarily getting credit for when we look at median income housing because of our current P&Z's commission failure to negotiate and allow transparency with the process. Thank you.
Ms. Fitz?
Can you hear me? Okay. So what a location to add 280 units. It's not like it's going to affect anybody's commute to Miller Driscoll or to work in the morning. Anyway, it would have been nice if this was something that was thought about in advance, that we had identified locations around the town that we could suggest to developers who are coming into town saying, hey, you might be interested in, this property at 345 Belden Hill, but we have other options that might better suit your needs. I'd like to also talk about planning, because it's something that we've all talked about a little bit up here, and how the plan of conservation and development, while it is a well-written document that sounds good on paper, it's the execution that is lacking, and the communication beyond that document that's also lacking. I feel like collaboration, as I said, collaboration with developers where we work with them to guide them toward properties that work best for our town is helpful. Additionally, if we have a plan for the entire town, we know how we expect it to grow over the next 20, 30, 40 years. We know what's appropriate then within our town. But because there isn't a plan that goes beyond and thinks toward future generations living in Wilton, we can't answer some of these questions. Something that I do for my job, depending on whatever job I'm on, I'm a contracted employee. I've worked in television for the last 30 years. A number of things that I've done include a competition type show in culinary where you have to build through these competitions. What I do is work with lawyers, I work with compliance, I organize, I come up creatively with how this is all going to be laid out. I lay it all out, I discuss with all the departments how it's going to go. We test things out because you wouldn't do something and spend money on it if you didn't test. We also, I plan significantly. I'm collaborative. I've worked in a male-dominated industry and I don't have an issue, speaking my mind to anyone at any time. And working with developers will be something that I do well. Anyway,
Does anyone have any additional comment on that question?
I'd just like to wonder what the alternative plan is. You know, are we talking about green space? I mean, this is, again, a tax exempt location for, you know, you're talking 50 years. And we have an opportunity as a town to increase our tax revenue. So I think that we should be focused on growth. Obviously, the infrastructure to support this property is very important, but I do think that there's a plan in place for that.
Any other comment on that question?
Yeah, again, there's not only one plan for this property, okay? So if this plan were to go away, which I'm not in any way against, it's a good plan, okay? But there isn't one plan for this property. I guarantee you, if this property goes away, there'll be a second.
And that could potentially be apartments on Belden Hill?
It could be.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would shut it off
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
I was just going to say that in terms of changing regulations, that maybe this isn't the project to change the regulations for, but I am not opposed to changing regulations when the time and the situation calls for it.
Any other comment? Ready for the next question? All right.
I have just one comment. I apologize. I just wanted to respond to Colin. I don't think that, again, it goes back to informed decision making. I don't think that we can even begin to fathom what can go there, what regulations, what projects should sort of alter or revise the regulations. I think we need to do a better job of listening to our town, seeking their input and asking what they want. And I don't think, you know, fear-mongering in terms of, oh, well, what's the alternative? Is it an apartment building? That's not going to bring our town or our community together, and that will only create more divisiveness. So I think that it starts with listening and hearing what our community has to say. Thank you.
And I'm going to finish that up with another big part of planning is figuring out how you can poke the holes in it. What are the rules that we've put in place, potentially in the plan of conservation and development, that aren't working appropriately for our town? How can we, if a developer is coming to our town and they see this, how can they work around these rules to get what they want? We need to poke all the holes in it, figure out how it isn't working, and how we can then restructure and streamline things so that the focus is on community good and benefit to our community.
I'd just like to say one final thing. I've never been involved in a traffic jam outside a senior living center of any kind, so I just wanted to go on record as saying that.
A quick question for you. Have you ever been stuck behind an ambulance outside a senior living center?
I'd like to say that I drive down Belden Hill every day, and even in the middle of the summer, I'm often stuck for 5 minutes at the corner where this development is happening. So I disagree that there are no traffic jams in that area, and I do not know for a fact that this will not increase the traffic in the area with ingress and egress, and or be a burden to the town's infrastructure. I simply don't have enough information